Leadership isn't just about directing teams. It's the critical difference between organizations that thrive and those that merely survive in today's unpredictable world. When leadership falters, the entire structure crumbles from the top down. The fish spoils from the head down, not from the tail up. In an era where remote work has transformed traditional management, where uncertainty is the only certainty, and where adaptability trumps rigid frameworks, leadership requires a revolutionary toolkit. The question isn't whether you can lead, it's whether you can lead with the flexibility that modern challenges demand, bridging mindset, skill set, and habit set to create lasting impact. Kevin Eikenberry brings over 3 decades of leadership expertise, transforming from farm-raised family businessman to corporate trainer at Chevron to founding the Kevin Eikenberry Group 31 years ago. As the author of approximately 20 leadership books, including his latest, Flexible Leadership, Kevin champions a refreshing philosophy that effective leadership transcends location and thrives on adaptability rather than fixed styles. His work with remote teams long before the pandemic positioned him as a visionary in the leadership space, helping organizations navigate change by focusing on what remains constant amid shifting landscapes. With his clear personal mission to help make the world a better place by helping leaders be more effective, Kevin embodies his belief that leadership is the greatest and most powerful lever to move the world in a positive direction. Today, we dive into Kevin's transformative insights on leadership in uncertain times.
Welcome to Impctrs Out Loud. I'm your host, Tracy B. Allen. Impctrs Out Loud is where social impact meets strategy, spotlighting trailblazing entrepreneurs, their challenges, and the revolutionary innovations driving real change. Each week, we dive into powerful stories, strategies, and insight to inspire and equip those passionate about making an impact through business. Today, I have with me Kevin Eikenberry, and he is here to talk to us about leadership and everything that goes along with leaders, because we know that the fish spoils from the head down, not from the tail up. So if you don't have good leadership skills, you're not going to be able to lead your team into success. So Kevin, welcome to Impctrs Out Loud. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your cause tale.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be with you. So I was born, no, we probably don't want to go back that far. My name is Kevin Eikenberry. I have the good fortune every day to lead a group of folks at the Kevin Eikenberry Group that are in the business of helping leaders get better and turn the world and help the world be a better place. And so my backstory is I grew up on a farm, involved in family businesses there, went to university, studied, thought I would go home into the family business. Some things changed there, not bad things, just the world didn't turn out the way I thought at one point. Eventually left corporate America and started a company about 31 years ago that became eventually the Kevin Eikenberry Group. And like I said, we're in the business of helping leaders be more effective so that we can make the world a better place.
Okay. In your corporate time, were you in leadership roles, and that's what made you decide that leadership was what you wanted to do your consulting in? And what about being a leader in the corporate space made you know that, hey, I need to teach people how to be better leaders?
Well, like most people who started in corporate America, I didn't start out in a leadership role, but I did find myself there down the way. While I was at Chevron, which is where I worked, I had the chance to do some training of salespeople, of our customers as a salesperson. And as often is the case, once you do something and you do it with some degree of success, although now I would say that wasn't very effective, then you get the chance to do more of it, right? And so I found myself getting the chance to do other sorts of training activities, found myself in the corporate training group for Chevron Corporation, and was there for several years. And so while I knew, in the backstory, I knew that eventually I wanted to have my own company. While I was doing training and development in a full-time role, I figured out, hey, this is the work that I was put on the planet to do. And so it was from there. So when I left, it wasn't necessarily or exactly 100% leadership. It was really
Mhm.
training and learning in organizations. But
Okay.
as time evolved in my company, we really began to focus almost entirely on leaders.
Because you do training courses as well,
Yeah,
correct?
we do lots of training. So I do
Mhm.
keynote speaking. We do lots and lots of training based on the books I've written over the years. We do some coaching. We do a lot of consulting around organizational change and such like that. So yeah, so really the broad range of what kinds of services might help leaders get better.
Mhm.
Those are the kinds of things we do.
Okay. Tell me about your books. What books have you written?
Well, the last time I counted between books that I wrote, co-wrote, or was a contributing author to, it's about 20. But
Oh,
I think
wow.
we're ultimately here in part because of my latest book, Flexible Leadership, which comes out as you and I are having this conversation. It comes out next week. And
Okay.
so, but I've written a lot in the areas, I'll put it in the broad areas of for new and frontline leaders.
Mhm.
So we wrote a book a number of years ago called From Bud to Boss. And then prior to the pandemic, co-wrote a book called Long Distance Leader, back when Corona was still beer. And
Mhm.
then as time went on during the pandemic, we finished a book. Actually, at the start of the pandemic, we were finishing the manuscript for a book called The Long Distance Teammate. And then we've also done The Long Distance Team. So
Okay.
quite a few things, but really in everything around, I think the sort of the biggest challenges that leaders face, the
Mhm.
first time leader doing it in a new and uncharted world. And then this latest book really about how do we lead and navigate in times of uncertainty, which is certainly what we find ourselves in today.
Okay, so I want to talk about 3 areas that you talked about. So the
Okay.
first one is leadership, basically remote leadership, right? So people
Mhm.
who are leading, but their people are not in front of them.
Or at least
And
not all the
that is
time,
very
right?
right. That is very interesting to me because I am that leader. Most of my people don't work where I work. They are in different countries, they're in different cities, different states. So tell me about the strategies for leadership. I know how I lead in that space, and it wasn't easy in the beginning. It was very hard for me to get comfortable leading people who I couldn't see and touch on a regular basis. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people found that, right? And I've
Mhm.
I've been leading a largely remote team, Tracy, for approaching 15 years now.
Okay.
So we started working with folks who had remote teams or mostly remote, some hybrid teams about,
Mhm.
I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And so, like I said, we were talking about this before the pandemic happened 5 years or so ago. But I would say in the short time that we have for this conversation today, it revolves. My biggest tip revolves around what we called the first rule in the book, which
Mhm.
was think leadership first, location second. So it's a really an important idea. So often in organizations, when we're trying to make change, we put all of our focus on what's changing.
Mhm.
And what's changing is important. That's why we're changing. But there's more things that aren't changing than are changing. And so for us as a remote leader, don't forget everything you already knew about leading, but the nuances and what is different does matter. And so when we're
Yeah.
thinking about that for us as a remote leader, that's true. But in the broader sense, when we think about helping create change in our organizations, it's important to help people see what's not changing as a foundation as we layer on what is changing. Because when we just talk about the change and that's all we're focusing on, people feel like they have no foundation, that
Mhm.
everything is shifting sand, and it makes it even harder for them to deal with the change itself.
Yes. I definitely agree with that. One of the things that I found out was essential is good communication strategies, right? How are we going to communicate with each other and how are we going to carry out tasks? and make sure that everybody understands where we are in the project. So having like a good project management system is, to me, a great tool to have in your remote work, whether it's on the side of the leader or the employee.
So to use that as an example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Having a good project management process is important, even if you see everybody all day long. It's just
True.
even more
Very
important.
true.
It's just even more important when we don't
Yeah.
see each other every
Mm-hmm.
day or ever. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just amplifies the importance of those processes. And the thing I would add to that is the importance of having super clear expectations.
Yes.
So much of what people had challenges with at the start of the pandemic and are continuing to
Mm-hmm.
have challenges with is there's never been a clear picture about what's expected. And
Mm-hmm.
so people are guessing, and they're almost always guessing with good intention. Like, I believe that 95% of people want to do good work 95% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody, not every day, but most all of the time.
Yeah.
And yet,
Yeah.
and yet success is defined by clear expectations. And
Yes.
so if people don't really know, they're guessing. And if they're not around their teammates, including you,
Mm-hmm.
their guesses probably aren't as good.
Right. Very true. Yeah, very true. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we see in the remote management space. Or just even when you have to deal with clients, it's the setting. I do agree, setting clear expectations is probably the key component to having a good relationship. One of the factors that you talk about too is the power of adaptability. And I think this is a great segue into it because it is remote and it is different from what we're accustomed to. Most people are accustomed to standing at the cooler and talk about what happened last night or over the weekend. And you're not able to do that in a remote space, not in the same way. So building relationships becomes a little tenuous, but being able to adapt, I think it's a good strategy that a lot of people don't have. But what do you say?
Let me make two comments about that. First of all, we actually on our team, we use Slack, and you might be using Microsoft Teams or some other tool,
Yep.
but we use Slack as our instant messaging tool.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have a channel called Water Cooler, which is designed
Really?
100% to talk about the kinds of things that
Oh,
aren't
that's
directly work
awesome.
related, but are the kind of things we would talk about if we were
Mhm.
hanging out in the office in the hallway. So right
Okay.
now, as we're having this conversation, it's
Mhm.
it's NCAA basketball time. So we actually
Okay.
have a March Madness channel as well. But fundamentally, then we've got a place for people to comment about that kind of stuff, talk about
Mhm.
what's going on in their lives, share about National Oreo Day, which was last week, and people talking about their
Mhm.
favorite Oreos, and like all of these just kind of silly things, but also sharing
Mhm.
pictures from vacations and all those sorts of things.
Oh,
And they're the
wow.
kinds of things that help bring and create bond for us. So
Mhm.
that's the first thing. And the second thing from what you said, I think is super important, is that so often when we are leading at a distance, the communications that we have become very transactional.
Mhm.
We talk about the project, we talk about the process, we talk about the problems,
Yeah.
we talk about the work,
Mhm.
and maybe we mention the weather, but we don't get beyond work and weather. And
Yeah.
so, what I'm suggesting is that's transaction. We have to transact the business, but we also
Mhm.
have to have interaction. And
Mhm.
so, my advice to you as a leader is to make sure that you're interacting with your team and not just transacting business. And so,
Mhm.
if you're doing that and setting that as an example, you're setting the table for others to feel like it's okay to do that during the workday with their peers. Like,
Mhm.
we didn't have to talk about that when we were in the building because people would just,
Right.
that would happen.
Yeah.
But we want to and need to do that as leaders to build those relationships and
Mhm.
nurture trust and all of those things. But we're also then modeling it for the team to do the same.
Okay. I love that. I didn't think about that. That's probably something I'm gonna go do now.
So
Or
it's
have a channel.
one of my goals is, as a leader, what are the things that are most important for me to be accomplishing every day? One of those is what I
Right.
call for me, it's the rule of four, that I want to have at least interactions with at least four members of the team every day. Again, going beyond work and weather. And that might be on the phone, it might be on a Zoom call, or it might just be the things we talk about and interact about in Slack, so that we're,
Yeah.
again, beyond work and weather.
Yeah, because I always tell my operations manager, it is important that we develop a family-like feel. So we need to know people's birthdays, their anniversary, when their kids are having birthdays, and we need to make sure that we are sending out some type of correspondence around that. So that's how I do mines, but I do like the Slack idea. I think that adds another layer of bonding that goes beyond what I'm doing currently. So I do like that.
We actually have a tool that we use in Slack that announces that. So everybody, first of all, when we have our
Mhm.
monthly meetings, we announce all of the things that are important in the next month.
Uh-huh.
Company things, but also company anniversaries, birthdays, etc. And then those things
Nice.
show up in Slack. So we have a great way for people to interact with each other
Yeah,
about those when they're happening,
I
for sure.
really like that. And then you talk about leadership mindset shift. And I find myself this entire week talking about mindset shift. I just did a 4-day challenge for nonprofit leaders around raising funds, especially through these turbulent times that we're going through. And I kept talking to them about shifting their mindset as the leader so that they can pull in their staff, their volunteers, and interact with potential donors. So tell me what your thoughts are around mindset shift when it comes to leadership.
Well, certainly you're talking about that directly related to fundraising and that sort of thing, which
Yeah.
is great. But the bigger idea, the bigger idea around mindset is that if we don't have our mindset connected to what we're trying to accomplish,
Mhm.
then we're not going to accomplish it. There has to be alignment there. So in my book, Flexible Leadership, we talk about three things. We talk about mindset, skill set, habit set. So most of the time in training or even in a podcast, the things that
Mhm.
get talked about are skills. Do this, try this. These are the skills. And all of that's wonderful. We have to have the skills. But if
Mhm.
the mindset doesn't match that, no one, if I don't see
It's not.
relevance in that skill, I might
Yeah.
intellectually learn it. I'm not going
Mhm.
to apply it. Why would I?
Right.
They
Mhm.
have to match. And then, of course, habit set is it's one thing to learn a skill. It's another thing to pick it up and use it, take it off of
Mhm.
our toolkit, out of our toolkit and apply it. And so the transition from knowing something to doing something is incredibly important. So we think about the triangle of mindset, skill set, habit set.
And how can leaders help their um, employees through that process? Because I find that when you talk about the triangle, I hear a lot of other leaders talking about that with their employees. They may have the skill set, but they can't get them to connect, or they have the mindset but not the skill set. So how can leaders help to encourage their employees to tap into all of that?
Well, let's start here. So if they have the mindset but not the skill set, then it's our job as a leader to help them get the skills, whether
Right.
that's investing in training,
Training.
buying them
Yeah.
a book, making sure everyone's whatever that is. Like,
Yeah.
but like
Mhm.
they have to have that raw material. So if that's the
Mhm.
gap, but I would say more often the gap is that we're not thinking about getting the mindset right to match up with the skills. We've given them an opportunity to do some e-learning. They've got LinkedIn learning.
Mhm.
We want everyone to, we're going to do a book club, whatever. Like we may be doing that stuff. And if we're not, we should, but
Right.
we need to match it up with the mindset, which means we need to be talking about, and we need to be modeling those mindsets. And then the
Mhm.
last one is, okay, I've sent them to training.
Right.
I've given them some resources to learn the skills. Well, the transition from knowing to doing is coaching, right? So at that point, it's about how do I
Okay.
coach them? How do I set a clear expectation to use these skills? How do I make sure that I'm modeling when I go to training? When I come
Mhm.
back, they see me doing something different.
Mhm.
And when they go to training and come back, I'm using that as generically, right? And
Yeah.
they come back, then the key is, are you talking to them about what they learned? Are you asking them about what their action plan is? Are you
Mhm.
asking how you can support and provide accountability for them to apply those things? Because if you
Mhm.
don't do that stuff, even people who have good intention,
Mhm.
it's hard. Like changing a habit is hard. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. And so if I've been doing something one way for months And now I've gotten some training and I've got a new way to do that thing. It's not automatically going to happen. Let's just be clear. Right.
And I do think that a lot of leaders think that it's automatically going to happen, because I hear a lot of my friends who are in leadership positions talk about not wanting to coach their employees. Oh, I sent them to training already. So what do I need to do
Good.
now? They
Now
just
you
need to
have a good
implement.
reason to coach. You set the table for them to be more successful.
Right.
Right? That's not excusing or absolving you of coaching.
Right.
That's providing you. So first of all, coaching should start with making sure they know why we're going to that training and how we're going to use it. Like if we get the mindset right on the front end, they're more likely to be paying attention, if you will, during, and then they're much more ready and open to doing the stuff that comes after.
Right. It's like a kid in high school saying, "What do I need to learn calculus for? I'm never going to use calculus," right? Because like you said, the expectation wasn't set. They don't understand what role calculus will play in their lives or the career path that they're choosing. You just tell them, "Oh, this is a requirement to graduate high school," basically.
I'm not sure I can answer the calculus question. I could answer the algebra question, maybe the geometry question, but even the calculus one, right? Okay, it's a step towards what you do want to do, right? And and will you use it directly? Maybe not, but it's a part of an overall process, and that in itself is helpful for people to have the context about all that. Super important.
Yeah. As I've learned a lot of things in my life that I don't use, but I know the information, and at some point in time, it comes in handy. All right. So we're
Don't
talking
ask me
about
to tell you how photosynthesis works, because I can't do that today, but I know it's important and I know we need it.
Yeah, I used to tell my kids when I used to teach, I said, it doesn't make sense to just sit there and hope that the information is going to come up to your brain via photosynthesis. They would just bust out laughing. They were like, "You say some silly things, Miss Allen." But yeah. So let's talk about moving beyond the style, understanding how leadership styles and strengths can limit effectiveness.
This is a big deal, because if you're a leader and you're listening to us, watching us, you are already in what I would say a special group, because you care about being better, or you wouldn't be watching podcasts, right? Listening to podcasts. You want to be more effective as a leader, and you're predisposed to those sorts of things. And so that tells me that chances are you've taken assessments. You've taken DISC, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. You've taken Strength Finders. You've taken a leadership style assessment. And all of those are awesome until they're not. Here's when they're not. When they become our identity. Because here's what an assessment, a style, a strengths, all those things are. What they are is a simplification of human behavior. They're designed to help us get our arms around human behavior, which is far too complex for us to deal with in a total. So we've smart people have built these models to help us put our arms around and simplify something. But if then we say, well, then that's me, we've further simplified it, which means, number one, that we're starting, it's losing its value in itself. But once we make it our identity, Tracy, here's what happens. We suddenly don't have any desire or need to change. Well, I now know. Like, if you've ever heard someone say these things like, well, that's my style. Well, that's just how I lead. That's how I've come to do it. That's just who I am. Now you've heard someone say that.
Yeah.
But chances are you've said it too.
Probably.
And think about how you feel when someone else says it. And then it's time to have a little bit of a moment of realization for ourselves. And so I'm a fan of those tools. We have a DISC assessment that we sell all day long, all around the world. There's nothing wrong with the tools. The problem is that we take something that is meant to simplify the world, and then we further simplify it by simply saying, this is my identity. And if that becomes true for us, or when it's true for us, we are unable to be flexible because our brain has blocked off other options.
Yeah. Yeah. That's That's true. Because I've said it about people. And sometimes I have had to come to the conclusion that my style does not work. Right. And that my style, especially maybe for a given situation,
In a moment. Exactly.
yeah,
Right.
does not work. And I need to adapt to what is going to make this situation actually work. Either that or I need to remove myself from the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way I think about it, and I said something the other day, because what I'm about to say is not in the new book, Flexible Leadership,
Mhm.
but it's I wish it was, right? But here's the thing. You've had a conversation with yourself, or when someone comes into your office with an issue and they ask what you should do, they want your advice, you're trying to make a decision, and you say, or you think, it depends. If you are willing to note that you say it depends, ask yourself, what does it depend on? Because now what
Right.
you're doing is you're looking at the context of the situation. And if
Mhm.
we're willing to look at the context of the situation rather than just doing the auto response, we
Mhm.
have the chance to be flexible. And Tracy, maybe that means the thing that is my natural, comfortable auto response is perfectly fine. But often, what in that moment of looking at the situation more, a little bit clearer, that would lead us to taking a different approach. And that's
Definitely.
at the heart of being a flexible leader.
Yeah. Yep. I agree 100%. Let's talk about adapting to change, Kevin. So this is a big one, right? Because it kind of goes back to what we just talked about. Adapting to change. Most people are, I want to say, allergic. That's the best word I can think of right now. They're allergic to change. You say the word change, and people start running for the hills. Okay. Because all they can think about is the changes, the things that are going to have to happen to get to the other side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So our first natural reaction, most everyone's first natural reaction to change is, uh-oh. And yet there's all sorts of, we have all sorts of personal experience with making change and even
Hmm.
making change willingly. So one of the
Hmm.
mistakes we make as leaders is assuming that people are going to resist change. Well, that's not the mistake, because resistance is naturally occurring. The mistake is
Right.
to assume that because they are resisting, that they don't like the change. There's a variety of reasons why people might have resistance. It could be lack of understanding. It could be all sorts of things. It could be a lack of discomfort. Like if I'm comfortable with the way things are, I don't have any desire change. That's the statement of, well, if it's not broke,
Mhm.
don't fix it. Except that just because it's not broken, like here's the test, everybody. If your spouse or significant other says to you that it's fine, you know it's not. The word fine does not imply awesome. It simply
Right.
implies, it's all right. And so
Mhm.
when people say it's not broken, we don't need to fix it. What they're really saying is, "Well, it's fine." When we
Mhm.
show them something that makes it look better, they're ready to move. So yeah, we have a natural inclination to be wary of change.
Yeah.
There is natural resistance to change, which might last for a short time or a long time.
Mhm.
Uh, the biggest thing for us to remember about helping people adapt to change, including ourselves, is to remember that there's always an emotional component to it.
Yeah.
And so simply trying to give people the perfect data set and logic
Mhm.
isn't going to be enough. And the
Yeah.
second thing is, imposing change is not likely to work nearly as well as having a conversation about it, because the best way to deal with the resistance even is to ask people, so tell me what your concerns are and let's
Mhm.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Because as people have a chance to talk about it, it's like letting the air out of the balloon. And number one, sometimes they realize themselves that that resistance doesn't really make sense, but they also provide the chance for us to now have a conversation about where the challenges are, what the issues are, and what we can do together to move forward.
Yes, I agree. I think that's why people have a lot of resistance to change is because they don't understand um, the dynamics of what the change is going to what's going to happen because of the change, and the change sometimes is the person who wants the change wants to implement the change too quickly. They're not giving people enough time to adapt.
Time is a huge piece here. And
Yeah.
obviously, as leaders, there's there's a tension in that we want to get things accomplished. And yet sometimes, and you've all heard this phrase, sometimes we have to go a little slower to go a little faster. And this, and
Exactly.
what you're describing is a time where that can often be the
Hmm.
case.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, this was a great conversation around leadership. I truly enjoyed it. You have made me change my mindset about some things and see some things that I can implement just to make it even stronger, because I do think I'm a good leader. My employees seem to be very happy with me. I haven't heard any complaints, but we always have room for improvement. And you have given me some tips and strategies that I can take away to be a better leader. So I know that my audience is definitely going to get value from this interview today.
Well, I hope
So,
that's true.
yes. What are 3 tips outside of what you said or based on what we talked about here today that you can leave the audience with around leadership change and the style of leadership that they have?
Okay. If you want to be a better leader, I'll give you 3 things to think about. The first thing is that leadership isn't about us. I mean, we've mostly talked today about what do we need to do differently as a leader, and that's important. But we have to remember that leadership isn't about us. Leadership is about outcomes and other people. And we need to keep our focus external to ourselves if we want to be more successful. And the second thing I would say is that I do believe that flexibility is the key to us being more effective as a leader, especially in a world that's continuing to change with the amount of uncertainty that we face. And that means that we have to ultimately, to be flexible means we have to realize that the world is not an either or world, but a both and world. And so there'll be lots of things where we'll feel like there's a tension between 2 ideas, and we need to take both of those into account, because either end of that continuum, what we would call a flexor, is probably not the right answer. The right answer is somewhere in between, utilizing both of those 2 things. And the third thing I would say is that the best leaders are continual learners. Being a leader is not easy. Being an effective leader is not easy. And there's a lot of moving parts, if you will. So if we want to be more effective as a leader, we got to do the kinds of things like you're doing right now, which is listening to smart people like Tracy and doing the things that help you, challenge you to continue to be more effective. Because here's the thing. Chances are you want your people to be learning. And the best chance you have to influence them to learn is if they see you learning.
Awesome. Thank you. And what makes you an impactor?
Well, I think I'm super clear on why I'm on the planet. And I think because of that, I'm able to coalesce our team around that same vision. And I said it at the beginning, we're in the business, in short, of helping make the world a better place by helping leaders be more effective, because we believe that leadership is the greatest and most powerful lever to move the world in a positive direction. So I think to the degree I'm an impactor, it's by being super clear on that point and then focusing as much of my attention and my energy and my talent in that direction.
Awesome. And Kevin, to wrap it up, let the people know where they can find you and how they can utilize your services. And if you do have your book that you want to plug, you can do that as well.
Well, listen, if you can spell my name, Kevin Eikenberry, Eikenberry, and you have the Google, like, you can find it, right? So
Right.
KevinEikenberry.com is our web address. If you're a LinkedIn person, please reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me where you found me. I would love that. But specifically related to, and so all of our products and services you can find at KevinEikenberry.com. But 2 things specifically related to this new book, Flexible Leadership. You can certainly buy a copy wherever you buy your books. But if you go to KevinEikenberry.com/flexible, you'll get access to a chapter and a lot of information about how you can get bonus materials if you buy more than 1 book, which, by the way, I really think you should do, not because I want to sell books, because if you really want to get better, if you buy 2 and you give 1 to someone else, then the 2 of you learning together have a far better chance of succeeding. It doesn't, not just with my book, with any book. Like, if you want to get better at something, buy 2, give 1 to a friend that's also interested, and then work on it together. Like, that's the way to do it. And then I also have a free gift, Tracy, for all of the folks who were here.
Sure.
They've stayed with us to the end. If you go to KevinEikenberry.com/gift, there you will get the chance to get a access to our remarkable masterclass on building our confidence and confidence in others, which we sell every day for $79. But if you're here and if you have that link, kevineikenberry.com/gift, you can get it for free.
Awesome. That's great. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today on Impactors Out Loud. I enjoyed this conversation, and I know that the audience will also enjoy this. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.